Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of written record that we have.
400 meters beneath the Persian Gulf, there is an entrance carved into the seafloor that nobody can explain. A vertical shaft cut through solid black basalt, sealed for 12,000 years, hidden under coordinates the Soviet military classified the moment they found it. And a clay tablet pressed into wet mud 5,000 years ago describes that entrance down to the centimeter. The dimensions match, the location matches, the architecture matches.
This piece of cuneiform inscription is a remarkable thing. This is the oldest map of the world in the world.
The Sumerians had no submarines. They had no sonar. They had no way to see what was waiting down there in the dark. So how did they know? The Forbidden Tablet. The tablet is catalog number 5ATN2772, and it sits in the basement of the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. Most visitors walk right past the cabinet. The cuneiform marks pressed into its surface look unremarkable next to the polished statues upstairs, but scholars who can actually read those marks describe VAT12772 as one of the most disturbing documents ever recovered from ancient Mesopotamia. It isn't a poem, it isn't a prayer, it isn't a creation myth. It reads like a maintenance log. The tablet belongs to a group of texts called the Eridu Genesis Collection. Eridu, according to Sumerian records, was the first city, period. Before Eridu, the Sumerians say humanity lived in scattered groups across the floodplains. No writing, no farming, no architecture. Then beings they called the Anunnaki arrived, and within a single generation, everything changed. Cities rose, calendars appeared, mathematics, metallurgy, astronomy, medicine. Civilization wasn't built brick by brick, it was installed. Most translators focus on the mythology, the gods who came from the sky, the flood, the creation of mankind from clay. That's the version you'll find in popular books and university lectures. But there's a parallel tradition almost nobody talks about. Technical tablets, inventory tablets. VT 12772 sits at the strangest end of it. It describes a place the Sumerians called the Abzu, not as a mythical underworld, but as a structure with walls, levels, seals, and an entrance you could physically walk through. Stay with me here, because the architecture is where this gets impossible. A vertical shaft, cut through rock, descending into a chamber with 7 levels. The first level for water processing, the second for what the tablet calls the purification of air, the third for the storage of knowledge, the fourth for biological processes. The fifth, sixth, and seventh are damaged on the tablet, broken away by time, but what remains describes geometric patterns carved into the walls, stones that gave off light without flame, and a central chamber where the Anunnaki interfaced with what the Sumerians called the Me. The fundamental principles of civilization: writing, law, mathematics, music, kingship, all of it stored somewhere beneath the seafloor. The tablet doesn't read like a hallucination, it reads like a blueprint. And then there are the coordinates. Coordinates a Bronze Age culture should not have been able to record. Coordinates that, until 1968, were one of the most tightly guarded secrets in the Soviet military. The Soviet leak. In 1968, a Soviet submarine operating in the Persian Gulf detected an anomaly on its sonar, a massive geometric formation on the ocean floor at 400 meters depth. Symmetrical. Repeating. Nothing natural produces that pattern. The coordinates were classified within hours. The crew was reassigned. The discovery was buried inside a black file that wouldn't see daylight for decades. Officially, nothing happened that day, but in 2001, those coordinates leaked. A former Soviet naval officer, long retired and apparently no longer afraid of consequences, published them in an obscure Russian journal almost nobody reads. A handful of Turkish marine archaeologists got hold of it. They cross-referenced the coordinates against the measurements on VAT 12772. The numbers aligned. The tablet described an entrance located where 2 great rivers met the sea, and 5,000 years ago, before sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, the Tigris and Euphrates emptied into the Persian Gulf at exactly that point. In 2004, A joint Turkish-American expedition went to look. What they found doesn't appear in any textbook. It doesn't appear on any map you can buy. 7 cylindrical structures arranged in a hexagonal pattern, 1 in the center and 6 around it, each cylinder roughly 30 meters. Across and extending 90 meters into the seafloor. The material was black basalt. The nearest natural source is 800 kilometers away in the mountains of Armenia. And the surfaces of the cylinders showed tool marks, cuts, angles that don't occur in natural erosion. I had to read this part twice. The dive team spent 11 days mapping the formation before the order came down. They photographed the cylinder surfaces in close detail. They measured the gaps between the structures, which turned out to be uniform to within a few centimeters. And they confirmed something even harder to explain. The hexagonal pattern wasn't aligned to magnetic north. It was aligned to true north, the kind of orientation that requires astronomical observation to calculate, the kind ancient civilizations weren't supposed to be capable of. Then the order came down. The Turkish government shut the expedition down within 3 weeks. The site was declared a military exclusion zone. Samples were confiscated, documentation was sealed. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Mehmet Özdogan, gave one short interview to a small Turkish newspaper before going completely silent. In that interview, he said the cylinders contained passages, internal chambers. And inside one of those chambers, his team had found something the authorities did not want him to discuss publicly. He wouldn't say what it was, but he did say one sentence that stuck in the minds of everyone who read it. Whatever was down there, he told the journalist, proved that the Sumerian records were not mythology. They were history. Then he disappeared. Not literally, but effectively. Reporters who tried to follow up were told he had taken early retirement. His university position was quietly filled. His name disappeared from conference programs he had been scheduled to attend. 22 years later, he has never given another interview about what his team found 400 meters under the Persian Gulf. Somebody decided the world wasn't ready to know. If a story like this is the reason you're here, hit subscribe and ring the bell. I publish forbidden history and suppressed archaeology every week, and next week's video pushes this thread even further into territory most historians refuse to touch. Stay with me, because what's coming next is the part that makes skeptics stop sleeping at night. The tablet also describes what happened inside the Abzu after it was built. It says the Anunnaki brought humans into the structure, not as slaves, as students. Small groups of carefully selected humans were taken down into the chambers and taught what the Sumerians called the sacred me. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, metallurgy, medicine, music, kingship. The foundations of everything that would become civilization. And when those humans emerged from the Abzu, they became the first priest-kings of Sumer. The tablet names them. And those names match exactly the names on the Sumerian king list, another ancient document mainstream historians usually dismiss as mythological. Think about what that means. The king list says the first kings of Sumer ruled for impossible lengths of time, tens of thousands of years in some cases. Scholars call that exaggeration. But what if the king list isn't exaggerating? What if those early reigns weren't human reigns at all? What if the Sumerians were recording, with painful accuracy, the lifespans of Anunnaki rulers, beings who lived far longer than humans, before governance was finally handed off to fully human kings? Read alongside VAT 12772, the king list stops looking like myth. It starts looking like a personnel file, a list of who ran what, for how long, before the keys got handed over. 7 seals, VAT 12772, doesn't just describe the Abzu's location. It describes how it was built. The text says the structure was completed before the Great Flood, designed to survive earthquakes, rising oceans, and changes to the atmosphere itself. The Anunnaki built it as a permanent installation, a base intended to function for thousands of years, even if no one was inside maintaining it. And it lists the 7 seals that protect the entrance, not ceremonial seals, not symbols, physical barriers. The tablet describes them as made from a material the Sumerians called heaven's metal, a substance that didn't rust, didn't corrode, didn't degrade, a material so unfamiliar to ancient humans they could only describe it through what it wasn't. It wasn't bronze, it wasn't copper, it wasn't gold. Modern metallurgists suggest the Sumerians might be describing a titanium-aluminum alloy or a ceramic matrix composite. Materials we only learned to manufacture in the last 50 years. Materials that would be ideal for long-term deep-sea construction in a corrosive saltwater environment. Now, look at what each seal does. The first protects against water pressure, the second against seismic vibration, the third against biological contamination. The 4th through 7th use language the Sumerians clearly didn't fully understand themselves. They speak of guarding against the unseen fire. They speak of warding off the sky poison, radiation shielding, atmospheric filtration. Concepts ancient humans had no vocabulary for because they had no reason to know they existed. The tablet also describes the interior of the Abzu. It says the chambers were lit by stones that captured the essence of the sun. Stones that glowed without heat, without flame, without consuming any fuel, and that never dimmed across centuries. For 200 years, scholars wrote this off as poetic metaphor. Ancient people, they said, inventing flowery descriptions of oil lamps. Then physics caught up. In 1998, researchers demonstrated that certain crystalline materials can store light and emit it gradually through a process called phosphorescence. In 2003, scientists developed materials that generate light from mechanical pressure through the piezoelectric effect. Build a chamber in a seismically active region where the seafloor is constantly vibrating, and you'd have a power source that never runs out. The tablet describes that exact arrangement. It also describes how the cylinders were carved. The Sumerians watched the Anunnaki cut stone using sound, not metaphorical sound. Actual acoustic frequencies that fractured rock along precise predetermined lines. The Sumerians had no idea what they were witnessing, so they recorded it the only way they could. They wrote that the gods sang to the stone until it broke. In the 1960s, modern engineers discovered that certain ultrasonic frequencies do exactly that. We use it today in surgery and industrial cutting. The Sumerians saw it 5,000 years ago, and they aren't done describing impossible things. Windows into the deep. Here's the detail almost nobody quotes when they talk about this tablet. The Abzu had windows, not windows looking up at the surface, windows looking out into the deep. The Anunnaki, according to the text, built transparent sections into the walls of the chambers so they could observe the ocean floor around them. And the tablet describes the material these windows were made from as crystallized water that never melted, ice that stayed solid under pressure, under heat, under any condition. Stay with me, because this one is verifiable. Modern engineers developed transparent aluminum in 2006, a ceramic clearer than glass and stronger than steel. If the Anunnaki had something similar, observation ports built from that material could absolutely survive at 400 meters for thousands of years. The tablet didn't predict a fantasy. It described a material we eventually figured out how to make, and the timeline lines up uncomfortably well. The tablet says the Abzu was sealed after the Great Flood, the same flood that appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the same flood that shows up in Genesis as Noah's flood, the same flood that geological evidence places at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, when glaciers melted and oceans rose more than 100 meters and coastal civilizations everywhere were swept under. If the Abzu was sealed before that event, it has been sitting on the ocean floor, untouched, for 12,000 years. 12,000 years, sealed, intact. Dr. Ozdogan's expedition only mapped the exterior. They never went inside. But their sonar told them the cylinders are hollow. There are chambers inside. And those chambers show no signs of flooding, no water intrusion, no internal collapse. Whatever sealing technology the builders used, it's still doing its job after 12 millennia underwater. Most modern construction is rated for 100 years. Something built before the pyramids is still holding pressure, which raises a question nobody wanted to ask out loud. If the seals still work, what about everything inside them? The MIT signal. In 2012, a Turkish engineer named Gökhan Sadar took the dimensions from VAT 12772 and built a three-dimensional model of what the Abzu might look like as a functioning facility. He published the result in an engineering journal. The structure he reconstructed was more sophisticated than anything human beings built until the 20th century. Multiple pressure locks, redundant air filtration, modular chambers that could be sealed off independently, a central shaft with spiral access, and a power system that, according to the tablet, drew energy directly from the Earth. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed his model. 3 years later, MIT found something they couldn't. A team of marine geologists conducted a survey of undersea volcanic vents in the Persian Gulf. They were looking for unusual ecosystems near hydrothermal activity. What they found instead, at the exact coordinates Dr. Ozdogan had explored, was an energy signature, a low-frequency electromagnetic field emanating from the seafloor. Exactly the kind of pattern you'd expect from an active power system. It wasn't random, it wasn't natural, it repeated every 18.7 seconds. Not 18, not 19. 18.7, every single time, like a clock built by someone who wanted us to know it was on purpose. MIT published the readings. Officially, the signal was attributed to unknown geological processes. Unofficially, 2 members of that research team quietly resigned and took jobs with private marine archaeology firms, whose work isn't published in journals. Neither will speak on the record, but one of them, talking to a journalist over drinks long after the fact, said the signal wasn't natural, and what they found scared them enough to refuse to publish what they actually believed. 2 scientists walked away from MIT. Think about what that costs. That signal is still down there, still pulsing. Every 18.7 seconds, on schedule, from the same coordinates where 7 hexagonally arranged cylinders sit sealed beneath the Persian Gulf. Power systems don't run for nothing. Something is using that power. The departure. The tablet describes the Anunnaki leaving Earth, not dying, leaving. It says they gathered at the entrance of the Abzu during what the Sumerians called the time of great darkness, which scholars believe refers to a solar eclipse. The crafts rose from the water in a formation, 7 of them, ascending in unison, while the remaining Anunnaki watched from shore. Human witnesses were present. The tablet names them. The crafts are described as cylindrical, made from the same heaven's metal as the seals, with surfaces that reflected light like polished silver. They made no sound except for a deep hum that the Sumerians said they felt in their chests rather than heard with their ears. The crafts rose vertically, churning the water into whirlpools as they lifted off, hovered briefly, then shot upward and disappeared into what the tablet calls the Black Ocean above the sky. 7 crafts, rising in formation, into space. There is no other reasonable way to interpret that passage. The Sumerians were describing vehicles ascending into orbit in language so specific you can almost see it through their eyes. The hum you feel rather than hear, that's low-frequency vibration. The whirlpools in the water, that's downdraft displacement. The reflective surfaces, the vertical ascent, the disappearance into the black ocean above. This isn't poetry. This is a witness report. And what makes it impossible to dismiss as one culture's fever dream is that the same scene appears in other ancient texts that had no contact with Sumeria. The Vedic literature of India describes vimanas, flying craft with strikingly similar specifications. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the gods departing in boats that moved through both water and sky. The Mayan Popol Vuh describes feathered serpents carrying the creators back to a place of origin beyond the stars. Different continents, different languages, different centuries, the same departure, witnessed independently. But the tablet says something else too, something that should be the first detail in every documentary about this, and somehow never is. Not all of them left. The Watchers. A faction of the Anunnaki chose to remain on Earth, and the tablet calls them the Watchers. They didn't live in cities. They didn't interact openly with humans. They operated from hidden locations, underground installations, fortified mountain sites, and according to the tablet, one group of Watchers remained inside the Abzu itself, sealed behind those 7 barriers, with instructions to maintain the facility until the others returned. The Sumerians described these Watchers as physically different from regular humans, taller, stronger. With facial features the texts call both beautiful and unsettling, a phrase that gets used over and over again in connection with them. And the tablet describes their eyes in a way that's hard to forget. Their eyes, the text says, reflected light the way the eyes of animals do at night. Read that twice. Their eyes reflected light at night. It's exactly what you'd expect from beings adapted to low-light environments, or beings whose vision was engineered for spectrums of light different from ours. And this detail isn't unique to Sumerian texts. The Book of Enoch describes watchers who came to Earth and gave humans forbidden knowledge. The Sumerian tablet doesn't use the word forbidden. It calls the information time-locked. Knowledge humanity wasn't ready for yet, but would need later, released in stages as we reached certain developmental milestones. The Watchers were supposed to guard that knowledge. Some of them broke protocol. According to Enoch, a faction of Watchers gave humans dangerous knowledge too early, and the result was catastrophe. The Sumerian tablet describes the flood as a deliberate response, not divine punishment. Environmental management. The Anunnaki who had left determined humanity was developing too fast in the wrong directions, that the Watchers had failed in their assignment, and so they triggered a reset. The tablet doesn't say how. It just says the Anunnaki opened the fountains of the deep and broke the dams of heaven. Geological evidence shows exactly that. Massive glacial melt at the end of the last ice age. Sea levels rising more than 100 meters in less than 1,000 years. Coastal civilizations everywhere wiped out. When the waters finally receded, humanity had to begin again. But the Abzu survived. The structure was designed for this exact scenario. The seals held. The Watchers inside survived. The tablet describes them entering a state the Sumerians compared to deep sleep, a biological process that let them wait, conserving resources, until conditions on the surface were right to wake again, sleeping, sealed, waiting under 12,000 years of seawater. If the seals are still holding, and MIT's signal says they are, then so is everything they were built to protect. The seed of return. The tablet says the Anunnaki left something behind when they departed. It calls it the seed of return, a mechanism designed to let them come back, or to let Earth call them back, when humanity reached the right level of development. Some researchers think the seed is technological, a device embedded somewhere inside the Abzu that will activate at a predetermined moment. Others think it's biological, that the Anunnaki edited human DNA and left genetic markers that would activate under specific conditions. I had to read this one twice too because the genetics caught up. In 2018, a major consumer genetics company published a peer-reviewed study on ancient human DNA from Mesopotamian populations. They identified genetic markers in modern Middle Eastern populations that don't match any known migration pattern, markers that appear suddenly around 5000 BCE, exactly when Sumerian civilization explodes into existence. The study didn't speculate about origins. It just flagged the markers as anomalous and moved on. But researchers in the ancient astronaut community connected the dots immediately. The Sumerians said the Anunnaki created or modified humans. The Sumerians said the priest kings carried something ordinary humans didn't. The DNA evidence suggests something genetic happened to that population at exactly the time the Sumerians say it happened. Coincidence is possible, so is the alternative, and there's a follow-up detail almost nobody talks about. When researchers ran the same analysis on populations that were never part of ancient Sumer, those genetic markers showed up too, in smaller percentages, scattered across the Mediterranean, the Caucasus, and parts of South Asia. The exact regions descendants of those original priest kings would have migrated to as Sumerian civilization broke apart. The markers track something deliberately seeded into a specific lineage. If the seed is genetic, some of us are carrying it right now. The question. Here's where the story arrives at the part most researchers won't say in public. The tablet describes the Abzu as self-sustaining. It describes biological processes, life support, internal atmosphere. The MIT survey picked up an active energy signature from the same coordinates. The structure is sealed but functional. And if the Anunnaki built it to last thousands of years, with watchers sealed inside in a state of suspended biological function, then the obvious question becomes impossible to avoid. What if they never left? There's a reason the Turkish government shut the 2004 expedition down inside 3 weeks. There's a reason the coordinates are classified at the highest level. There's a reason Dr. Ozdogan refused to speak again. There's a reason the MIT researchers walked away from their academic careers. Because whatever is at the bottom of the Persian Gulf challenges every assumption we make about human origins, about who built civilization, and about whether we have ever truly been alone on this planet. The Sumerians didn't write myths, they wrote reports. They wrote down what they saw with the same precision they used to record grain shipments and royal genealogies. And what they saw was beings from the sky who built a structure beneath the ocean, taught humans how to be civilized, and left with a promise to return. VAT 12772 isn't a religious text. It's a record. It's a blueprint. It's a message addressed to whoever would eventually be capable of reading it. And the 7 cylinders are still down there, 400 meters below the surface of the Persian Gulf, sealed, functional, pulsing every 18.7 seconds. The tablet ends with a line that's haunted every researcher who's read it. It says the seals will break when the time is right, when humanity is ready. And when they break, what comes out will either elevate us or destroy us. The Abzu doesn't only contain technology, it contains the truth about where we came from, what we were designed for, and what's been waiting under the water all this time. So here's what I want to know, and be honest in the comments. Do you believe the Anunnaki are still down there, sleeping behind those 7 seals, waiting to wake up? Or did they leave for good 12,000 years ago? And the structure is just an empty monument? I read every reply, and the answers split almost exactly down the middle. Tell me where you stand, and while you're at it, click the video on screen right now, because next week I'm covering the declassified CIA document that proves remote viewers, working blind from a sealed room in Virginia, described the same 7 cylinders the Sumerians wrote about 5,000 years ago. You don't want to miss it.